So yeah, what we'll cover in this session is what mould is, risks of damp and mould, sources of moisture in the home, how moisture impacts health, causes of damp and mould, managing moisture, insulation, ventilation, and how Retrofit West can help. So I just wanted to do a little short introduction on who Retrofit West are. I'm sure you're sort of familiar with this already, seeing as you've received this invite. But just for reminders, we are a not-for-profit community interest company. We are publicly funded by the West of England Combined Authority. We were created to help homeowners across the West of England understand how to improve their home's energy efficiency. We focus primarily on the self-funded market. Those are homeowners who don't qualify for funding but want to invest in their property to make improvements and don't know where to start. So our sort of priorities are to help people cut energy bills and energy use, support healthier, more comfortable homes, reduce carbon emissions across the region, strengthen the local supply chain by connecting homeowners, installers and suppliers. We also put on training and events for professionals, and we work with a number of community groups in the region. Everything we do is impartial and community focused. I just sort of want to reiterate that. So what is mould? So the picture you can see here is an example of black mould, which is typically found around windows and in cold and damp spots. Mould is a type of fungus that thrives in damp conditions. It grows on materials like plaster, paint, wood and fabrics, basically anything with an organic surface it can feed on. It releases tiny particles, including allergens and irritants, which can affect our health, especially for people with asthma or respiratory issues. The main cause of moisture in homes is through condensation, which I'll come onto in more detail later. That's when warm, moist air hits a cold surface like a wall or window, and the moisture in the air turns to water droplets and adheres to that surface. If those areas don't dry out properly, often because of poor ventilation, mould can start to grow and spread. So good habits like keeping the home well ventilated and regularly drying damp areas can make a big difference in preventing it from happening. So what are the risks of damp and mould? They don't just look unpleasant, they can affect both our health and our building's health. So mould release tiny spores into the air that can trigger allergic reactions, coughing, wheezing, irritation to the eyes and skin. Some types even produce toxins that can be harmful if you're exposed to them over a long period of time. I'm sure everyone's read recent news articles about certain people's living conditions, particularly in social housing or low-income households, which are very, very severe. So yeah, it's increasingly important to take note of these risks, particularly with anyone that has sort of asthma or breathing problems or weakened immune systems. But as I say, it's not just a health issue, it's also a building issue. Damp damages the fabric of the building. It can cause plaster to crumble. It can cause paint to peel off, timbers to rot. It can lead to rust or structural issues if left untreated. A lot of people try to deal with mould by cleaning or painting over it, and while that might make it look better for a short period of time, it doesn't always solve the problem. Even mould-resistant paints or sprays are really just short-term fixes, and if you're doing them regularly, they can be an annual thing and can be expensive. It doesn't actually get to the root cause, so yeah, the mould will keep coming back. So sources of moisture in the home. Having moisture in the air is completely normal. It's produced by everyday living. Every person and pet releases water vapor just by breathing and through perspiration. I think on average, humans generally release about 1 litre a day. Then there's things like cooking, boiling the kettle, running baths, showers, which add much more. Things like drying clothes indoors can release several litres of water into the air, especially during the winter when the windows are closed and you're not ventilating that air. Even houseplants give off a small amount of air. Beyond lifestyle sources, damp can also come from building faults such as roof leaks, faulty gutters, leaking pipes, rising damp from the ground. I think, well, there's a little thing there that says on average, a 3-bedroom home can contain around 1.3 litres of moisture floating around in the air at any given time, and even more when the property is poorly ventilated. Worth noting, but I'm sure we're all aware, that the UK is very cool and wet, and much of its housing stock is very old and not well insulated, which means that we're particularly susceptible to moisture problems. They're way more common here than they are in other countries. So moisture and health, I put this slide in because I find this graph is a really good way to sort of demonstrate, how these problems can start occurring at different levels of humidity. So in retrofit, we talk a lot about relative humidity. Relative humidity is a way of describing how much moisture is in the air. If you kind of think of it like a sponge, the air can only hold so much water before it starts to feel damp. Relative humidity tells us how full that sponge is. So ideally, we want that relative humidity to be around 40 to 60%. That's the range where homes feel comfortable, and the risks, which you can see in this table, become much lower. When humidity gets too high, mold and fungi can grow more easily, and that can trigger asthma, allergies, and other breathing issues. Dust mites also thrive in these conditions, which can make symptoms like eczema or hay fever even worse. Too much moisture can even trap chemicals from things like paints, cleaning products, or furniture, and can lead to eye irritation. Those are volatile organic compounds that you can see there. And when homes aren't well ventilated, CO2 levels can build up, and this makes people feel tired, sluggish, and less able to concentrate. So yeah, keeping the balance comes down to three things, really. It's good ventilation, managing the moisture sources, and maintaining some background level of heat. So what are the main causes of damp then? So condensation is the most common type that we're all aware of. Just a reminder, this happens when warm, moist air meets a cold surface, forming water droplets. Areas with poor airflow, like behind furniture, in the corners of rooms, and behind wall hangings, are most at risk. Rising damp is sort of less common, but it's usually found in older buildings without a proper damp proof course. It appears at the base of the wall and can show as white salt deposits rather than mould, and this is where you're seeing sort of the moisture rise up and then come down again, and it leaves a sort of faint line. This is linked to ground moisture, and it worsens in wet periods, but can improve as it dries. And then there's penetrating damp, which is caused by water entering through leaks, blocked gutters, cracks, any sort of broken areas of the building envelope. And this appears to sort of localized damp patches that darken, particularly after rain, and will take some time to dry. It's important to note that each type of damp I've just mentioned has its own different cause and solution. So it's important to identify the type of damp in your home before deciding on any treatment. So just to get into a bit more detail about condensation, this is an image of a window sill which is blown, showing condensation on the inside of the surface of the glass. So yeah, condensation occurs when warm air hits cold surfaces. Everyday activities like cooking, showering, and washing, and even breathing add moisture to the indoor air. And without proper ventilation, this moisture accumulates and settles on cold surfaces. Thermal bridges are areas where heat escapes more quickly, such as junctions between building elements, like walls and roofs, window reveals, ceiling edges. These surfaces get colder than the rest of the room, making them prime spots for condensation and the potential for mold growth. So maintaining background heating helps keep surfaces above the dew point. So ensuring that there's like adequate heating in a home is really key. Lots of us underheat our properties. This doesn't mean overheating our rooms, but yeah, and we should all sort of avoid large fluctuations in temperature, but just maintaining good background heating is a key sort of thing to keep at the back of your mind when trying to manage condensation. I'll get onto more of the sort of additional measures through ventilation and fabric style stuff a bit later on. Yeah, so many households try to save energy by closing vents or heating certain rooms, but this can worsen condensation by allowing humid air to concentrate in cooler areas. So just something else to take note of. So causes of rising damp. This image here shows white mold forming, and the photo is taken in a basement, I believe. So rising damp occurs when ground moisture moves up through the walls by capillary action. It's most common in older buildings that lack a sort of modern damp-proof course, or where a DPC may have failed. You'll usually see it at the base of walls, often as a damp patch or white powdery salt deposits called efflorescence. It's different from mould, which tends to form higher up on the walls due to condensation. Rising damp can affect both solid and cavity walls. So solid walls, they're absorbing moisture directly from the ground. The damp can travel a metre or so up the wall if it goes unchecked. It can then sort of come down again as it dries. And like I mentioned previously, this can come with influxes of rain. With cavity walls, this usually happens, which are walls which have a gap designed to stop moisture in the first place from reaching the inner wall. This happens when the cavity is blocked, when you get things like rubble or insulation that isn't correct, sort of bridging that cavity, or if the DPC has been bypassed. Just as I said before, rising damp is kind of cyclical. It worsens during prolonged weather periods, and it can improve in drier weather. It can be mitigated with improved drainage around the property and better airflow beneath the subfloor if it's suspended in any way. Or you can consider introducing a DPC in some instances. But yes, the correct sort of diagnosis is essential before any sort of treatment. And I'll kind of reiterate this point throughout the presentation, that it's always key to identify the root cause before considering the next steps. And it's kind of just sort of the backbone of our advice, really. But there are lots of solutions out there. So I will come on to those a bit more as we move forward. Causes of penetrating damp then. So penetrating damp happens when water gets through the building envelope from outside via external leaks. Common causes include maintenance issues, so blocked or overflowing gutters, damaged roof tiles, broken flashings, down pipes which may have broken, damaged or missing seals around windows and doors, cracked or failing render on external walls, which allows rain to penetrate, sort of spalling or deteriorated brickwork, which can let water through the surface, and internal plumbing leaks as well, through the bathroom or kitchen. Something that won't improve by just heating or ventilating. The solution is to repair the source of the water ingress and ensure that ongoing maintenance is scheduled in. Regular inspections of roofs, gutters, exterior walls and seals are key to preventing further damage. Our advice is always begin with repair and remediation of the property, ensuring that the building fabric is well sealed and functional before considering any additional measures. So managing moisture risk then, so before tackling mould, the first step is always to understand where moisture is coming from. Different types of damp, condensation, rising damp, water ingress, they all need different solutions. Once the source is clear, the goal is always to reduce moisture and prevent it building up. So we're always encouraging airflow and ventilation to remove excess moisture, keeping surfaces warm and dry through insulation and background heating, adopting simple habits like carefully drying clothes, using extractor fans, regular airing, that sort of thing. Combining building improvements with small behavioural changes is the most effective way to manage moisture and prevent mould. So that sort of sets me up for the next bit, where we'll look at in more detail the sort of more draughtproofing, insulation and ventilation measures that can help keep your home dry and healthy. So draughtproofing, I'm sure everyone's sort of familiar with this, but draughtproofing is one of the simplest and most affordable ways to help manage moisture levels within a building. Uncontrolled air movement can carry warm, moisture-laden air into cooler parts of the building fabric, where it can then condense and contribute to damp and mould. By reducing these uncontrolled air paths, draughtproofing can maintain more stable internal conditions and prevent moisture from being drawn into or through the wall and floors. We recommend sealing gaps around windows and doors and floorboards using flexible sealants and draughtproof strips. Chimney balloons can be used if you have open chimney spaces that are unblocked. Letterboxes can be fit with flaps, and you can get the brushes that sit at the end of the external doors for any sort of unwanted air movement. I guess it's just important to note that it's always important to maintain some background ventilation to allow moisture to escape carefully. Draughtproofing does a really great job of sealing in the moisture within the property, so making sure that it has a way to escape is key there. To avoid unintended consequences and condensation risks. So insulating your home, insulation is often thought of only in terms of keeping the home warm, but it also plays a role in managing moisture. So by keeping the walls, ceilings and floors warmer, insulation helps prevent surfaces from dropping below that dew point where you start to get condensation forming. Warmer surfaces mean less water settling on walls and windows, and again that just reduces the risk of mould. However, not all insulation behaves the same. There are materials that interact with building typologies differently and therefore interact with moisture differently, and these make a big difference. Some allow moisture to pass through and dry out naturally, while others trap or prevent moisture from passing. Choosing the right type is essential to avoid any sort of unintended problems. So that sort of brings me on to the next bit, which is about moisture open and moisture closed materials. So buildings manage moisture differently, and knowing whether a home is moisture open or breathable, which is sort of a common term used, or moisture closed, where they are sealed, is essential for sort of choosing the right retrofit strategy. Moisture open buildings are usually older solid wall constructions and have been constructed with things like stone, brick, clay, lime, and these walls can absorb and release moisture naturally, helping the building fabric stay dry. Insulation that's suitable for these wall types are wood fibre, mineral wool, hemp, cork, sheep's wool. And yeah, it's just best to avoid any sort of impermeable materials or airtight sort of membranes, vapor membranes without proper ventilation, as these can lead to trapping in moisture and causing damage to the actual building fabric. So moisture closed buildings, so this is typical of modern constructions with cavity walls, airtight membranes, vapor barriers. The envelope is designed to keep moisture out, so internal moisture must be managed with ventilation. Insulation is more suitable for these, the more sort of conventional stuff that you see off the shelf, which is like PIR boards or XPS you may have heard of, EPS, which they all form a sealed layer. I think it's important to note that you should always check sort of real world performance, like how the building behaves with current occupants, the climate conditions, and lots of other factors, because installing the wrong materials for the building type can lead to a lot of problems with condensation, destruction of the building fabric, and sort of mold and rot. So ventilation options then. So improving the insulation keeps the home warmer, but can also reduce natural airflow. So without proper ventilation, moisture can build up, increasing the risk of damp and mould. The key principle is build tight, ventilate right. This is a common retrofit industry mantra that's said quite a lot, but it's quite a good one to sort of reflect upon. The idea being that if you seal in gaps to keep the heat in, you need to make sure that there is controlled ventilation to remove the moisture and stale air. Natural ventilation works when you can provide airflow through openable windows, trickle vents, and subfloor air bricks. This, like creating cross flows between two windows, can be an effective way to purge internal stale air. What else? There's, things can also include things like gaps and cracks around windows, doors, and floors, particularly if you have open suspended timber flooring, with the original timber floors, there's normally lots of gaps there which allow for air leakage and infiltration, chimneys and open flues. All these things create uncontrolled ventilation. There's mechanical ventilation, which is used when natural airflow isn't enough. This is controlled ventilation, which provides you a mechanical solution to the problem. I'll run through these in a bit more detail, but they are things like intermittent extract fans and MVHR, if you've heard of that. So natural ventilation relies on air movement caused by differences in wind pressure and temperature between indoors and outdoors. It works best when the air can enter and leave the room freely, creating a sort of cross-flow. Openable windows are the main form of natural ventilation. When windows are on opposite sides, they can create this cross-ventilation and flush out humid air. Their performance depends on occupants remembering to use them and sort of the sort of layout of the property as well. Or if it's cold and rainy and windy, then you're probably going to keep the windows closed. Trickle vents provide background ventilation on windows. They allow slow, continuous exchange of air, and they help reduce sort of stuffiness and control moisture buildup. Air bricks and subfloor vents, they don't actually ventilate the internal occupancy space, but they help prevent moisture accumulation beneath the suspended floor. So, I mean, if you live in an old property that has a suspended floor, do check that you have air bricks and ventilation. Hopefully, if you're in a terrace property, make sure it's at front and back so you do get that sort of cross flow of air. And if you don't have them, then sort of make sure that they are reinstated because they are essential for maintaining a dry underfloor. In homes that have been retrofitted with insulation and air tightness improvements, natural ventilation alone often becomes insufficient. The reduced air leakage means less unintended air exchange, so moisture from cooking, showering and drying clothes can build up more quickly. In older homes, which are more permeable, unintentional gaps and cracks in walls and floors and roofs allow it to escape and enter continuously. So whilst this prevents stale air buildup, it's that uncontrolled ventilation that I mentioned, which means that you're sort of wasting heat and can create drafts, and overall you don't have an energy efficient property. So natural ventilation can support indoor air quality, but it cannot be relied upon alone in well-insulated or airtight homes. In these cases, mechanical ventilation becomes necessary to manage moisture and consistently whilst retaining heat. Oh yeah, here's some images that I put together just to show you some examples of some trickle vents there on the top left. That's just a nice picture of a window on the top right. That is a new air brick to a property in Bristol. And on the bottom right there is a door. I didn't actually mention undercuts, but so you can allow the passage of air in properties if you leave a small gap beneath your internal doors. So that image is just demonstrating the sort of space that you should allow. I can't remember the exact distance, but I think it might be a couple of centimeters. So mechanical ventilation then. So mechanical ventilation, it provides a controlled, consistent way to remove moisture and stale air. It reduces the risk of condensation and mould, and improves well, it really depends on the home's air tightness and layout and budget. So the one we're all familiar with is intermittent extract fans, which are in bathrooms and kitchens. It's the cheapest solution. It's normally turned on when you turn the light switch or a button. They require regular cleaning and maintenance, but they do often leave a lot of moisture behind and are insufficient in dealing with internal moisture problems. Decentralized mechanical extract vents run continuously and at a low rate. We tend to advise on these quite a lot because they are still a relatively low cost measure and are similar to intermittent fans, so people are kind of used to them. But they do run continuously. They do make a small noise, but it's no louder than a sort of fridge. They have boost functions on them which respond to humidity in the air, so they'll come on and make sound a bit louder and purge that moisture until it reaches a certain level before quietening down again. If you want to look at a more sophisticated system, there are things like MVHR, which extracts stale air and moisture from rooms, and It's a whole ducting system which has like a centralized unit. There's a heat exchanger which recovers heat from any air that gets chucked outside. And yeah, it's really effective in airtight homes, but it's incredibly expensive. It's great if you want to go for all the bells and whistles, but it probably isn't a suitable option for everybody. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just going to move on. There's some pictures there of an MVHR unit on the left-hand side. The top right one shows some ducting in a subfloor, and the bottom image there is just an intermittent fan. DMEVs look quite similar in nature, but they normally have a closed face cap on top. So what makes a good retrofit design? It all comes down to making sure that a professional designer and retrofit or a retrofit assessor are on board. Assessing the building, looking at how the home handles moisture and everything is really key. Identifying the risks and priorities of that home. Not every home needs a whole house retrofit. Some targeted improvements like insulating one wall or upgrading ventilation in wet rooms can be enough. Make sure you select the right materials, the right insulations, membranes to match the building type is really key. Planning the work effectively is really essential. So ensuring that those repairs and repairs to sort of waterproofing and water ingress are done before you consider any fabric measures. And yeah, coordinating the measures effectively. So yeah, seeking professional advice and assessments is always the most important first step. Solutions should always be tailored to your property, and not every retrofit needs to be a full-scale project. So how can we help? So I said at our core sort of service is to provide free advice. But we have recently had the luxury of being able to offer free home visits. So our advisors, this is Nathan that you can see here. Here's one of our trained retrofit advisors based in Bristol. Will actually come to your property for free and spend 30 minutes for you to provide you with some impartial advice, identify any damp and mold issues, and signpost you to the next steps, whether or not that's an assessment or maybe an installer, a contractor or something. We're also handing out these hygrometers, which is a little picture there, and that just gives you a temperature and a relative humidity in the room that you place it in. It's a really good way to identify whether your moisture level is too high. So yeah, if you get a free home visit, then you will receive one of these for free. If you want to take it a step further, we have an internal assessment service called the Home Energy Efficiency Plan, and this involves a trained retrofit assessor coming to your property and doing a full building condition sort of survey, but not like an inspection, more like maybe not taking actual, I don't want to overpromise anything, but taking actual like building condition measurements. But they will look at things like your heating system, your ventilation systems, what's suitable for the property. It will include a report at the end of it with a phasing of all the different retrofit measures that we think are appropriate, as well as how that will impact things like carbon, energy bills. It will have associated costs. Yeah, lots of great guidance and next steps in there. At the moment, we are also providing free project support services to people who have a HEEP survey, which is basically free project management services, just to help push you towards an installation. We're really keen to sort of motivate people and keep people going on this sort of retrofit journey, so to speak. So yeah, another great offer at the moment is that yeah, that's all free. So the actual cost of the initial survey is about, I think it's about, yeah, it says there £150 for a 2 to 3 bed, and it goes up incrementally based on bedroom sizes. We do offer a number of other assessments through partners, which include thermal imaging surveys, which would be really good at identifying cold spots, air tightness tests, and we're also offering heat pump assessments. And they're all through a number of partners that we're working with. I think there's currently about 10 people on there, and we're offering 70% off on their assessments, the cheapest of which starts at about £84. I think that brings us to the end. I've overrun a bit, and I hope you've got enough information from that. I've just left the QR code on the screen there, because if you follow that and you're interested in booking a free home visit or speaking to one of our advisors over the phone, you'll be taken to a page where you can do that through a Calendly link. I've also left our website there, obviously, an email address if you prefer just to go on there.